Hello friends, this is Darry again for 3x Point. In this video we'll continue learning about functions and we'll start introducing a concept called group by clause. Okay, group by clause works with aggregate function, and that's why it was very important for us to understand first what we mean by aggregate functions before we can introduce the group by clause. Okay, so let me bring up my slide. Okay, I beg your pardon while I look for my slide. All right, got it. There we are. So let's have a look at the definition. If you don't understand what this definition is, don't worry. Okay, don't stress trying to understand the grammar. All right, because we're actually going to demonstrate it. So the definition says group by clause is used to group a selected set of rows into a set of summary rows by the values of one or more columns or expressions. Then it says it is always used in conjunction with one or more aggregate functions. You see, we can best understand this by demonstration, right? So we're going to demonstrate that. But before we actually go into group by demonstration, let me introduce some problems that lead us into using group by, so that we'll try to achieve something that cannot be achieved except we use the group by function. That's what I mean by that. Before I bring up my slide, my management studio, have a look at this data set. The one on the left, you can see that we have all the products, the units sold, unit cost. I'm actually going to change this unit cost to unit price because that's what it is. It's actually unit price. So we'll do that when we get into Management Studio. So if we wanted to have the total sales, to get the total sales, we have to multiply the units sold by the unit price. And that way, for Dell laptop, if you multiply 3 by 500, we'll have 1,500, right? Yes, we'll have 1,500. Okay. Now, if you look at Dell laptop here, on the right hand side, we have 1,500, which is cool. But how did we achieve this? Let's try to achieve it given the knowledge you understand about SQL without group by. Don't think about group by right now. Let's actually try to achieve this without the group by clause. So let's go into Management Studio, and if we select everything from this table, we have the data set. As you can see, I've actually changed the column to unit price because that's what it is. So let's say we want to calculate the total sales. And how would we do that? We would say select products. Let's bring back our products so we can see the total sales for the products in question, and unit underscore sold multiplied by unit underscore price. So these two together, I'm sure you understand what we're doing here. So as you can see, we're gradually going into proper SQL writing. You know, something that maybe 2 weeks ago, if you saw it, you definitely won't be able to interpret it. But obviously, I'm hoping you will be able to interpret these kinds of SQL when you see them. So from sales, and if we run this together, you can see we have products and we have the total sales. So let's give this an alias, total sales. You'd observe that I have introduced a square bracket here. If we run this, that's what we get. So why did we use square brackets? That's because we had to use space in here. You see this space here? If I didn't put this square bracket, I won't be able to use the space. I will have to find something to join them together. So if I used underscore, it will be fine. So if you don't want to use underscore, or you just want space to be in between, then you have to use the square bracket. So don't be confused when you see something like this. All right, so moving on. So we have this, and then if you like, you can put as there. Some people actually like to see the as so that you can understand what's going on. All right, so now that we have this, one question that might come to your mind right now is this: why do we have to do this calculation? Why couldn't we just create the table and keep the total sales permanently on the table, so that when we do select star from the table, we already have the total sales, right? Now, this is not a good practice in SQL Server. Anything that can be achieved on the fly when you run your query, it is always advisable not to keep them permanently stored on the database table, because you see, it doesn't make sense. You just be wasting disk space by doing that. So it makes sense to rather keep static data, static data like this, and when you need some other kind of data, you can on the fly write your select statement or your SQL statement and then bring back the data that you want. So it makes sense. Okay, so we have it, no problem. What we're actually after is to be able to sum the total sales per product. Let me remove the other one there. So let's focus on this. So the task at hand right now is, you can see we have bag, and the total sales for bag here is 350. The total sales for bag here is 200. If we wanted to sum these two together, how can we do that? So similarly, we have Dell laptop here, we have Dell laptop here as well. So we have 1005 here, we have 2005 here. If we were to sum them together, we would need an aggregate function, right? So simply, we would just say sum, right? That's how we should ideally do it. But if we did this, you can see that it brings back an error. And that's where group by comes to help us out. So if I did group by and then say product, you would see that it's done for us exactly what we wanted. So you can see that we now have bag 550, which has been summed up together. Let's actually bring the old data so that we can see them side by side. So the old data was, let me just do this, makes my work fast. And then I would remove this sum and bring back both. So you can see, let's raise this up a little bit. Oh, come on. Oh yeah, that's it. So now you can see bag 350 plus 200. You can see we have 550 altogether. Let's introduce the where clause. I believe you already know what where clause is. Oops. Where what's the name of the column? Product. Where product equals bag. Okay, good. So let's bring back both. All right, so now you can see we have two bags, and then 350 plus 200 is 550. If we did the same thing for battery, let's see what we get back. So 800 plus 200, we have 1000. You see, so what group by is basically doing is this: you want to sum total sales, right? Based on what? That's the question. So you have to be able to sum them by something. I mean, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be sum, it could be average. Let's assume that what we're interested in is average. It still has to use the group by because it is an aggregate function. And remember, we said aggregate function returns a single value based on the input that you put into it. So put something into it, and it's returning a single value for each of the products. And that's what's going on. So for bag, we have a single value. For battery, we have a single value, you know. So it doesn't matter. So if we wanted max, for example, it follows the same principle. So it's returning the max for each. So for example, we have battery. The max should be 800, and that's what we have, 800. So you see, the aggregate functions do a lot of things for us, and we can only use them either alone, which is like this. If I did this alone without the group by, this would work. Okay, this will work. But the moment you start grouping by something, then you must introduce the group by. Because remember, aggregate function returns just one, and that's the reason why it doesn't need group by, as long as it's returning just one value. But the moment you want to return values across the entire table, you have to introduce the group by, and that's what we get there. Okay, and obviously you know the reason why this is null, because from our data set we have a null value somewhere. Okay, so moving on, let's talk about something. We have, because it is also important to differentiate between the where clause and the having clause, because there's something called the having. All right, let's assume we have this two data set back. So this is returning data for us. We don't need the group by because we didn't introduce any aggregate function. But this one, we're using a group by because we've introduced an aggregate function. Now, let's assume now that we've used an aggregate function, we wanted just the bag. Okay, so if I said where product equals bag, and let's change this to bag. Let's see if this will work. You can see already it's complaining. See, incorrect syntax near the keyword where, and that's because where does not work anytime we introduce group by. So what works is having. So this is a very, very important thing to take note of, because it is indeed an interview question. So you need to be able to differentiate between the where and the having. So they both mean the same thing. The only difference is just that having works after you have introduced the group by clause. So you use it to filter the data after you have introduced having. After you've introduced the group by. And the group by is introduced just because we have introduced an aggregate function. Now, on the other side, you might start asking again, can we actually use the group by without a function? So yes, indeed, we can actually do that, and let's try that in action and see if we can actually use the group by without the aggregate function. So let's bring back everything from the table. Okay. Right. So let's now say we need product and we need unit sold together, and let's order by both of them. If you are not familiar with order by, what order by does is it helps us to order it in alphabetical or descending order. That's all it does, nothing more. So by default it is ascending. So if you don't specify ascending, that's what it will do. Let me quickly run this so you can see that. So you can see it has just ordered everything for us in ascending order. So B comes first, B, then there's no C, then it goes to D, and then H, like that. That's what it means. And if we did descending, which is DSC, and execute it, we would see that the reason why this is like that is because it is there. Let me do it this way. So if we use descending by product, so you can see we have H and then D and then that. So it's very important to understand that the first, if you're ordering by 2 different columns, so if I didn't specify descending here, that means it would say order by products after it has ordered by products, and then it will order by units. Okay, so if I didn't specify units, so let's say this is the only thing I want to order by, it can be like that. It doesn't matter, but sometimes you want to order by 2 or more columns, but we'll still do a lot of work with order by in the future. So I just need to introduce you to it at this point, so we can buttress the fact that you can use group by even though you don't have an aggregate function. All right, so the reason why you would want to do that is this. Let's say I now want select product units sold from sales. Now I say group by product and units sold. Okay, you should understand that anytime you introduce group by, it has to involve all the columns in the select list. So let's say I didn't specify units sold, you will see that it will throw an error. So anytime you use group by, just know that it has to involve every column that's been involved in the select list. Okay, all right, so let's have a look at these 2 data sets. Actually, let's not use descending, let's order by ascending. Okay, one thing you would observe is we have 13 rows returned here, which is expected because that's everything we have from the table. But here we have 12. We have 12. And if you look closely, the reason why we have 13 here and 12 there is because if you look at the Dell laptop, we have 3 data sets returned. Here we have 4. And if you look again, you can see that we have 3 appearing twice for Dell laptop, but here it's bring about just 3. It's just going to bring one of them because it is distinct. It's like saying give me distinct values, so it's just going to pick one of them. Right now, this is when you use group by without an aggregate function. If you just want to return data and just group them together, so for every product and units that are distinct together, bring it back. So you can see that we have bag and 4. If we had another occurrence of bag and 4, it's just going to bring back 1 for us, right? So imagine if we had hundreds of records for bag, and among that 50 had had 4. So if we had units sold 4, bag 4, when we group them together like that, we're just going to have one of them because we're telling it, okay, go and look for me where these 2 occur together. Okay, so when you say group by these 2 things, then I'm saying give it to me where they occur together. If I introduced city and I say group by city as well, you would see that the data set, it's still the same, and that's just because it still meets the requirements of the select statement, because where this we have bag 4 and London together, had it been we have the same occurring again, then it will reduce the number of data sets that's been returned. But this is just to demonstrate to you that we can actually use the group by without aggregate function. All right, so the other side of the coin is whenever an aggregate function is returned, then definitely you have to use the group by clause. I hope that is quite informative for you. Right, so we have a couple more examples to do in this session. And if I bring up my slide to quickly show you something, you can see that from our table we have unsummarized data, which is what we've been working with. And if we intend to summarize by product only, then we can say, okay, now that we've calculated the total sales, then we just say product, comma, then total sales, and group by product. If on the other hand we want to summarize data by both product and city, then you'll find out that our data sets will be reduced. And what that means is it will say, okay, in London, how many sales did we make of bag? In London, how many sales did we make of battery? If before we had everything together, so we will have a look at a couple more things. And to do that, let me bring up my slide so I can buttress a few more points. So looking at this slide, you can see that we have our unsummarized data, which we've been working with. And on the right hand side, we can see that we have summarized data by product and city. And bottom here, we can see we have summarized data by product only. So depending on what sort of data we want to have a look at. So let's say, for example, let's focus on the one at the bottom. If only we just wanted to see the total sales of bags, everything, regardless of the city, regardless of where the sale was made, we just want to see all the sales that was made on bag only. All we have to do is write the select statement, introduce the sum aggregate function to sum for us all the total sales and group by product, and that's it. But if we're interested to see by region and say, okay, in London, how many products were sold of bag? In New York, how many products were sold of bag? In Lagos, how many products were sold of bag? Then when you're writing your group by, you have to specify both product and city. So the system understands that what you want to see is you want to summarize the data, but you're interested to have the view of both the product and the city distinct together. And this is a very important concept for you to understand. If you miss this, it will affect your analysis skills a lot. Let's have a look at that and let's see how that plays out. Let me bring this thing down. It's really tiny. So if I did select product, and let's copy our total sales. Given our previous tutorials, you can see that we can actually write this another way. In case you noticed, we can actually do something like this. It's still the same thing. From sales. Okay. And this will fail, obviously, if we don't introduce the group by. Remember that. So group by product. Now what this is saying is, okay, we want to see all the sales by product, right? Let's bring this. So where product equals bag, so that you can see each of the data. Oops, what's going on? Oh, okay. This is actually something very interesting. you can see I actually have two. We have I put a blank, a white space there, and that's why it didn't return anything back for bag. So you see, this is very important. You know, if you did something like this, SQL Server will tell you, oops, it doesn't exist. You can see. So you have to be careful. So when you write your statements and you run into things like that, everything you do, you know, remember attention to detail. It's very important. So if we okay, so bag we have 350. Oh, we actually need the total sales. So what we will do in this case will be, let's bring this back and run this. Okay, so I believe you understand what this query is doing, the one at the top. So the reason why we didn't use group by, you obviously by now you can tell, because we didn't introduce an aggregate function. So that's where it's not summing anything for us, it's only calculating unit sold and unit price together. So, and we said where product equals bag, even though we're not returning the product column, it still understand that we're filtering it by bag. So that's why this is like that. So the other one, you can see that we now have 350. Oops, actually something is not right. Is it? Okay, we should have, let's have a look what's going on. Okay, some of you may have seen it already. It's because we're still using max from our previous example. Okay, so that's what happened. Great. So now we have total together, which is 550, right? So 350 plus 200, we have 550, right? Okay, so this will tell us that our view is focused on the product, right? Let's assume we now want the city as well. If we run this query, it will fail. And the reason why it will fail is because, you guessed it, we didn't introduce the city. But now it should be fine. Okay. If we look at the data again, let me bring this up. You can see now that we don't have bag split as a whole anymore. Now we have two bags. Yes, before we had the summation of these two together, but now we have them differently. Why? Because now we have bags sold in Lagos, we have bags sold in London. So you can see the power of group by here. So anytime you introduce group by, you're limiting the you're changing the scope of the summary or the aggregation that you're doing. So if we introduced another column, then we're saying group by these three things together. But in this case, we're grouping by these two things together. So it has to be distinct. So imagine if we had another bag that was sold in Lagos, then it will consider those as the same, and then it will sum them together and give us the value. But because Lagos is different from London, then it will treat them as two separate things. So this is all about group by that you need to understand. Nothing more. The moment you understand this concept, then you are good to go. So group by, aggregate functions, they all work together. And if I wanted to now limit the data set that's been returned after I have done all this calculation and put all the aggregate functions, I can as well do that. I could just say where product equals let's say battery, and if I did that, it would only just give me data for battery. If I'm interested to see, okay, what's going on in London, I can just change that to where city equals London. And you can see It just brings back all the products that have been sold in London, and we just get all the data that we want back. So having is the same thing as where, it's just that it comes after the group by. So this is all you need to know. We will practice more. That's my advice to you. Practice more, do all the exercises, all the business cases that have been given to you, and try to crack down and go outside your way, go on the internet and try to learn more about those things, try to practice more. By now I would expect you start going into your AdventureWorks database and start doing some data analysis. So we'll see in the next video, and then we will continue our learning and enjoy more things. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.